Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Dauntless Leadership. And I am so excited to welcome Lisa Paley of Haleon to this episode. If you are new to our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite platform, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or at dauntless.works if you want to watch us on video. Thank you, Lisa, for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it.
I'm going to start by asking you to first tell me a little bit about your career journey and then your definition of dauntless.
Yeah, I've been in a similar industry for over 30 years, but I've loved every minute of it. And it never got dull or boring. And I started as a CPA. So I started with a degree in accounting, got certified. But one of my first clients was a big consumer health company. And so from that, I got inspired and I got busy, and a lot of those skills just transferred over. And from there, I really parlayed that comfort with data and information and knowledge into a completely different industry, but one where I was going to be really front lines with the consumers. And I've just loved that. I really took a commercial slant with my career, which was a lot coming up through functions like sales and data and analytics and internal and external assignments, and really honing in skills with customers, retailers in this case, and also experts, and really took that on to just keep elevating through different roles and experiences. Did a lot of assignments where they were kind of go-to assignments, and so I met a lot of people and I built these networks over time, and I loved being where the action was. That was the one consistent thing. I think one of my big assignments was to begin to break into more general management. I took an assignment. I did it, it was running the Caribbean. It was different languages, different cultures, and a bunch of things that I needed to learn to be able to continue to broaden and grow. And came back from that, and they called me and said, "Can you come back early and can you be our new chief customer officer?" And I said, "Absolutely, I would love to." Because one of the important things is to really have that integrity and those value systems that allow companies to endure. And I think from there, it just kept elevating, but primarily because I kept taking advantage of opportunities that were being presented, and they can feel like change or they can feel like opportunities. And I just kept leaning into the opportunity side of it. And from there, I went on to be the president of North America. And that allowed me to broaden not just US responsibilities, which I'd had a lot of, but also then into Canada. And those were really, and thrilling assignments. That was at Pfizer Consumer Healthcare. And those who follow that healthcare industry at all know it's just been merger acquisition. And from there, Pfizer ended up getting acquired by GSK. And then I was running a similar business for GSK. And then GSK spun off into Haleon. And so for the last 2.5 years, I've been the president of North America for Haleon, and really starting up a very large corporation. So getting a little bit of that entrepreneurial, but a lot of that, large company experience. And it's been best. I mean, I'm just so energized by the career I've been able to have.
Lisa, I wrote down a couple of things I didn't know about you that I want to talk about, like that you started as a CPA or that you were in the Caribbean. But first, tell me, what does dauntless mean to you?
Yeah, I think, one, I love that that's what you've named your series, because I think, Lisa, you have certainly got this enduring power. But what dauntless means to me, it is about that bold, it's about that courage, it's about sticking with something long enough to break through and really make a difference at what you do or the situation that you're in. When I think about people who really exemplify this, you think about like a Rosa Parks, you think about like a Malala Yousafzai, who, in parts of the world where she's just advocating for women's education and then has assassination attempts, like these women just persevere and persevere and persevere, right? Because they will not be denied. And I think that's what dauntless means. And we do it on different scales, obviously, right? Sometimes it's a matter of those things that are life and death, like the examples I gave, but very principled leadership in general, and that endurance. I think that ability to have that resilience and just keep making change happen.
Endurance, principled leadership, perseverance, these are great qualities. That is why I named this series Dauntless Leadership. And frankly, why I asked you to be on the podcast. I think those characteristics really describe you and the way that you've led throughout the years. And I met you when you were in a sales role at Pfizer Consumer Health. I'm not even sure if you were Chief Customer Officer yet. And I just loved how authentic you were. You were true to yourself. And as I've had the honor of watching you over the years, you've not only kept true to yourself, but you've imbued your organizations with the ethics and integrity and cultural values that you bring. And I want to share with our listeners that's got to be a little scary. Many times you've stepped out beyond what other folks are doing, especially in the consumer packaged goods industry, to create environments, frankly, for women and men. But I've watched as you've made things comfortable for women in particular, um, and uh, and still had great business results. So I'd love to hear, how do you kind of gird your loins to do what you know is right, even if there's risk involved, which I think is dauntless too.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to, you're always kind of weighing those risks. And I think I think sometimes people just underestimate their ability to have positive change, honestly. Like, set the table you're at is what I say to people a lot. Because when you do that, you are not only, telling people verbally what you believe and value, but you're showing them through your action. And you're also at the same time making change one by one. And that's how change happens. We feel like it happens on these large scales, and but it doesn't. It happens by a lot of people beginning to make, little changes over time, and these habits get going, and then they get emulated and they get momentum, right? And so that's how it is. And I think the other thing was, I never ever thought I could do it alone. I've always done it through teams and others, and networks and contacts, and bringing people with me on the journey that I wanted to take. And I think it's a really important part, of being about something bigger than yourself, and knowing that, you weren't going to do this differently. It is also, Lisa, about having courage sometimes, and being willing to take some of those risks that you talk about. Because I can remember coming up in my career and there weren't women everywhere. I was looking up oftentimes, and I might have been the only woman in a room for many parts of, the middle part of my career. I would say the early and middle part for sure. And I think, I'm grateful, but I did find my voice early in my career. But I also picked my battles wisely. I wasn't about everything at once. It was about, well, what matters. So what was a little thing? Like, in the beginning, we would have outings and things like at the company, and they would give us these men's shirts. And I'd be like, I'm not wearing a man's shirt. Like, I need a woman's shirt. Like, I'll wear this. I'm happy to put on your logo, but give me something that I'm actually going to wear. And so, it was little things like that, but just asking the questions, but doing it in ways that people could hear and understand and not be like, put off by. And I think, that made a big difference in just starting to make ground and headway.
So a couple of thoughts come from that. The first is just start. I do think that takes courage to just start with something small and move on from there, knowing that your teams and yours certainly respect you to grab onto it and take it forward and put it to make it part of the organization. So counsel to people who may feel more junior in an organization, who may feel like they can't make a difference, taking a little step, just starting is a way to get going, to have an influence. And I think for me, it took a long time for me to realize it's okay if you don't have sweeping changes, especially if you're not in a role of power. Do what you can. Make the environment around your brand or your business or your department what you want it to be. And then maybe eventually it grows with you as people leave and move to other places. And uh, it took me too long, I think, to get there. So that's advice I'd want people to have.
I think that's right. I think like getting started is something really important, and it is really good advice. Um, and and the risk is lower than you think sometimes, right? Like we believe like it could be really scary or it's daunting or the leader doesn't want to hear something. Actually, leaders love to hear. They love to see, earlier in career people taking some of those risks and
Hmm.
chances. They like a little bit of pushback. They like to know that they're thinking about, what's being asked of them, and how they're considering their parts of the business that they can really own and drive and influence. And yeah, so I actually encourage, a lot of that. I give a lot of permission slips. I'm like, here's your permission slip. Like, just go, let's hear what's on
But
your mind.
good leaders like to hear. And I think, we're going to talk about what are the characteristics of a good leader. To me, being open to hearing from people at all levels is one of them. And I was sharing with you that I recorded our last episodes with Gen Z and millennial women talking about what motivates them. And two things they said that really resonated with me were one, tell us why. Don't just tell us what. Whereas the boomer generation might just have, give me marching orders, I go.
Yeah.
These younger generations, they want to know why. And it's not an unreasonable question. And also, um, open the door to a conversation, which I think you uniquely do. Um, Let me tell you what's important to me. Let me share with you how I'd like to shape things. In fact, one of them recommended a podcast on how to be a better listener, which I said I could always be a better listener. So I listened to it last night. Um, do you agree that those are important characteristics of leadership? And what else would you say to emerging leaders they should
Well,
demonstrate?
I think what they're pointing out is what leaders need to be in tune to is what matters to the people they're leading. Because when you look around, you have followership, right? I mean, that's really what ultimately determines a leader. So if they're telling you what matters to me is to understand why you want me to do something and not just what you want me to do, then it absolutely is important that a leader helps, fill in that information for them and give that clarity, within an organization. And I think it's a fair request. I'm glad they're that curious, because I think curiosity is a big part of growing and learning. And so, yes, and yeah, and I think being reasonable with the other request as well. I mean, I think what they're asking for is fair. And I have found that in all generations that I've worked with, you do have to continue to modify and adjust in order to continue to attract the best possible colleagues and workforce that you can. And so staying in tune to what matters to them is a good sign of leadership. And how do you get that information? You listen, you ask questions, you probe, and you find out, and you sit in informal. So a lot of my communication, I do, of course, it's formal. It's, you're talking to large groups, but I also do what I call huddles because I want the two-way conversation. I want an environment that's safe for them to ask that question. And those might be groups of 15, 20, 25. And I'll take a couple of my leadership team and we'll sit down and we'll say, like, what's on your mind? Here's what's going on in the business at very high level. I'll give them two or three things. That starts the conversation. I'll let them know I'm going to come to you guys for questions and dialogue here in just a couple minutes. And then they will engage. And that's how you learn a little bit more about, like, what are they thinking about? How are things that we're trying to accomplish landing? It's more of a conversation. And I think that's a really important part, that two-way, not just talking to them, but hearing from them.
Huddles. That's a great idea for people to think about. And again, you don't have to be president to have a huddle with people whom you might respect, whose ideas you want, whose opinions you want at any level. Anything else that you look for in emerging leaders, things that you really want to see people demonstrate? And I added curiosity to the list. That's come up a lot too.
Yeah, I think curiosity is big. I also like empathy. We're going to talk a little bit about culture and some things later, I'm sure, Lisa. But one of the things that, I was really proud of the group for, we at Haleon, we really value, diverse ideas, and we really support a lot of our employee resource groups and things of that nature. And we had one start really organically. And I was so proud of the people who went to the effort to get it started. And it was really around caregivers. And
Huh.
the reason I thought it was so interesting is because obviously there's an undercurrent of people who are dealing with that, whether you're caring for a special needs child or you're caring for a period of time for, an ailing adult, or you have a parent that is, going to be a longer term commitment. And we've all kind of encountered different parts of this, but what they were finding was they didn't have a support network, of others who were sort of going through this something similar. So there were a group of about 4 or 5, in this case, most happened to be women. They got together and they said, look, we're going to create this support network. We're going to organize ourselves. We're going to get a sponsor and we're going to go. And that was like a year ago. And then this past year, fast forward, again, all this is organic, right? But it's just enabled in a culture is what makes it flourish. And about a year later, they came and we just celebrated our first Bring Your Parents to Work Day. Like, how fun and cool is that, right? Because, and again, it's this very organic nature. And the parents, by the way, they were not only the stars of this show, but they loved it. They loved getting to know each other. They were as proud to see their adult children doing something in a workforce as they would have been, going to a school play 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You know what I mean? So it was just such a cool, organic nurturing of something that started with somebody having an idea, not having the idea, but doing something about the idea. That's what I think, helps with what does good look like when you're earlier and you're trying to, separate yourself, but doing something
Just
about
do
it.
it.
Yeah,
Just do
just do
it.
it.
And caregiving is near and dear to my heart too. So I love hearing that that's something that people found support with others. And I think over the generations of our work life, we're all going to have some caregiving
Absolutely.
responsibilities. Um,
Absolutely.
let's talk about culture because I think that you've created a unique culture at Haleon where a leave for caregiving is allowed,
Right.
where people feel that they can be, I think, themselves and still lead great brands. Um,
Yes.
talk
For
a
sure.
little bit about that.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time on the culture. I mean, look, we've had to really lean on culture because we were starting a new company and we had to really do the right analysis on what was that going to look. And I think one of the things that we got really, really right was having a very meaningful purpose, better everyday health with humanity. And there's some really key words in that. But being able to pull through humanity in a meaningful way in a company gives you a really cool starting point, right? So one of the first things, that we did was really set up this like 6-month parental leave, regardless of how the kid was coming in, regardless of which parent you were. And that was very empowering. And we've had people, I think we're creating a little baby boomlet, to be honest with you, because people like it's such a peace of mind to know that you can get a 6-month leave and still have your job to come back to and be there for the really important stages, of early development of a child. And when you're also adopting, right, whether it's your first, second, or third, you're making big adjustments in your life at that time. People have really, appreciated that. I think progressiveness on that. We talked about the ability to leave for care, which you mentioned. So yeah, we do have a policy that allows for a 4-week leave if you need it. And that can be chunked out or all at once, depending on what you're facing. But again, knowing, because when you get into those situations, it is really acute, right? Like it has your attention and you have a lot you have to deal with. And you also have this responsibility, which you don't really want to let down people either place, right? So this allows you to be able to focus for a period of time and then come back and be really great, at your job again. And so those are important. We did other things culturally, the behaviors that we wanted. We started a lot of brands with purpose. And that allowed people to really gravitate towards something that was meaningful, that they knew they were going to have a difference. And this is also something that really appeals to young talent. They want to make a difference in this world and their community and their company. And that I think, and the consumers love it. So as a consumer company, that fits, really well with us. We started wellness days. Actually, I don't know if we're going to be able to do enough for mental wellness, right, in the time that we are leading in now. But one of the things that we were noticing, and we started it during COVID, but we didn't get rid of it, was people needed a different space for mental wellness. And because everybody was dealing with some things for the first time, regardless of how you were experiencing it. And what we said is, you know what, having the meeting intensity, not knowing if it's day or night and your days are just all blending together. We created a day each month where we don't have meetings. Like you can't, we take the intensity out of it on purpose. People can use that to further their wellness. They can take the walks in the afternoon. They can get the music in their ears if they want. They can get to a doctor appointment that they haven't been able to get to. Like, it's a work day, but you're using it in a very intentionally different way, all in the spirit really of being a health and wellness company to further health and wellness. So it builds loyalty. It builds, like it's a culture that people want to be a part of, because we have very high expectations on performance as well, right? So it's not that you give up one to do the other; it's the and, because the other is going to be there all the time. We're of course we have to perform, very very well. And so I think those are the types of things, Lisa, I think some of the stuff is probably, near best in class, but that's more because the colleagues have told us that, like our engagement scores are super high, and people want to be a part of it.
From the outside, I can absolutely verify that. Uh, the cultural piece of integrating wellness days monthly as opposed to just a couple days in the beginning of the year. We talked
Yep,
a lot about that with younger professionals too. It needs to be integrated throughout, and so you've done that. And I also know that at your organization, if someone were to say it's not a wellness day, but I need to do something, that's acceptable.
100%.
Business results do matter though. And I think that giving people this space lets them be better at their job. You didn't talk about the fact that as people take leaves, you've also created opportunities within the
Yeah,
organization, which is really interesting, kind of stretch opportunities
yeah.
for Haleon personnel, which I think is the wave of the future. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great byproduct of what we were, some of the changes we were making, but also because it goes back to, we really do believe in helping people reach their full potential, in their careers, and that's a lot of growth and development. But part of the way that we do that is we allow people to take what we call them secondments, which is a secondment into a different assignment. So if they want to go in and cover that mat leave, for example, we make arrangements for folks to be able to do that. Or we'll split up those responsibilities, and people might get new opportunities to go into different forums or touch a different category. And those are all stretchy things, that help you really broaden your career experiences. They're not forever things, right? It's also time bound, and it's an agreement, and colleagues have found them very energizing. And by the way, that's at every level in the organization. I mean, I have people that report directly to me that are on secondment right now. One's
Hmm.
doing a global assignment, for example, and we have some that are early in career that are able to step up. And I have one that's going to start, and she's going to get a great exposure to a leadership team on a regular basis, which she might not have gotten until much later in her career without this kind of a step up opportunity. And so, yeah, and we encourage it. We create all the ways that can happen, and we mechanize it, so that there's a way and a roadmap for people to come in and out of assignments, and it's worked really great.
I don't think you know, or maybe you do, how unusual that is. My company was FlexForce focused on filling open
Yeah.
roles, maternity and otherwise, and we still have an opportunity to do that with you. But the fact that you're giving these stretch opportunities to people as somebody does take a leave, that's, as far as I know, still very unique. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, you look to those who raise their hand and say, I'm interested in this. I want to learn. I want to try something new. Again, as indication of potential leadership down the
Yeah.
road. Is that right?
It's absolutely right. And I would say, Lisa, like, even for the ones who get the opportunity, absolutely, but even for those who interview for it, because I'll tell you, like, I am always impressed when I've met somebody I didn't know as much about before the interview, and I learned something, just by them going through the process. And maybe it's not that next opportunity, but down the road, I have now gotten more exposure to them. I know what their other capabilities and their skills are, and they've had a chance to build a connection. And so I think sometimes, we fear the process too, right? Like we don't want the rejection of not getting it, but just keep in mind, it's maybe not get that one, but you'll get something, and it'll build to something else down the road. And I think, it's this constant, short and long game that you manage in your career.
That's good to hear, that you're not necessarily crossed off the list if you give it a try, but in fact you maybe get some brownie points
Yeah.
for giving
And
it a try
great
for the
exposure.
future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. You talked about your early stage involvement as a CPA, and we know that data is so important these days in being a good marketer. And by the way, we'll put up the Haleon URL and the brands so
Yeah.
people can make sure that they're enjoying your brands. If they don't know, it's brands like Advil and Centrum and Emergency, daily products that everybody should have in their household that are led with humanity.
Yes.
But one of the things I think about as I work on future marketing curriculum is how do we make creative people who are interested in marketing and strategy also good managers of data? Do you think your accounting background help with that? And what are a few things that marketers should be thinking about mastering to be
Uh,
strong leaders in the future?
well, you nailed one of them. I mean, it a lot of it is going to come down to the data and analytics, and even though you might not be doing it, you have to understand what's being done because so much of it is becoming machine generated, right?
Mhm.
But you have to know, like, how are you reaching those consumers? What is that media black box that's happening for you, that's getting you targeted to get your messages to the individuals that you're trying to reach with your brand? So absolutely, you have to understand the data. You have to understand the broader context. You really need to put consumers first always. So you have to, again, you have to have curiosity about what does the research say? What does that data say? How do I compare to, not only the what I'm trying to do, but the standards of when this gets done? And you have to understand, that there's been a lot of learning before you and there'll be a lot of learning after you. You have to really know how to pick up and differentiate what good looks like. You still have to know, like, where is this all hitting? The financials, and you have to understand the bigger picture of what's expected, and how to, really, we call it end to end. You have to really understand your business end to end. What does that mean? Like, you have to look back and see how is it manufactured, and you have to look forward and you have to say how and where is it being consumed, right? And through those two lenses, you then need to come back and say, okay, what do I do to optimize both of those, directions? And so, yeah, we call it a lot of modern marketing, Lisa, to your point, because again, most of it will be digitized, right? In ways that it hasn't been before. They're getting into, just been talking, I mean, AI, you have to, I say, like, don't, we are teaching everybody AI because we think it will be everywhere, right? And every role will need to know how to use it and leverage it and not be afraid of it. And I would just say that in general, you've got to be comfortable with technology. And you don't have to be an expert at every piece of technology, but you have to have a comfort and again, that curiosity. Um, and I think the marketing is just going to continue to blend. It's really the commercialization, because when was it selling and when is it marketing? Like, that's all blending. When you are meeting the consumer where you're meeting them and how you're meeting them today. So I do think, I wouldn't get too hung up on the function. I would stay really focused on the consumer and how you bring a superior product to market.
Uh, all really great input. If you don't mind, I'll share it with Rutgers University too. I think what we're saying is it's really important always to keep the consumer at the heart of what we do. And now more than ever, we can ask her, him, or them, and get information cheaply and fast. That we need to understand the data and the technology doesn't mean we have to be able to execute or implement everything, but we need to understand the output and what
Yeah.
to ask of these technologies. And to
The,
me,
the
I just,
technology is, Lisa, one that we didn't, maybe that I didn't just mention there that I would add is really, do you have the right empathy? Do you
empathy.
understand? And it's an understanding of the consumer. But when you look at where consumers are today, right, you have some that are faring very well. Like, it's all, life is good and grand. And you have some that are really struggling. And have you really put yourself in their shoes and tried to, experience what you're trying to market to them through their lenses? And I think sometimes it takes people, especially early in career, a long time to develop the right level of empathy for what they're really asking the consumer to do.
And I see that empathy in some of your newest advertising. So I know that you're pulling that through the organization. Switching gears a bit to talk about the power of networks. I said that I feel lucky to have you on this podcast and be able to call you and say, what should future marketers be developing? I think I've known you probably 15 years.
That's what I estimated too, Lee. It's about
Yeah.
15. Yeah.
Uh, how do we help younger women put a priority on networking and making sure that they think about pulling other women up with them?
Yeah. Well, I think networking is actually one of women's superpowers.
Mm.
I think women, and this is a broad statement, so take it as that, but it, we have superpowers around connection, right? About getting connected, connecting others to it. I always say, like, for women, they will build the relationships to build the business, right?
Yeah.
For men, they'll build the business and get a relationship, like,
Mm.
because and so it's just how we orient towards sort of similar goals. And I do think that networking is a part of how women can really leverage their strength. And so why I think that's why it's important. So that's just one. I think, it's usually more fun to do it with others than to do it alone. And that's what a network, will provide you. The other thing is you're going to get into situations where you need sounding boards. You need people to thought partner with you, or you need people who can challenge you and bring different perspectives. And that's what a network really affords you. So that's, for me, reasons to invest in it. Now, I think you asked another important question in there, though, Lisa, which is, how do you make time for it? Right? Because regardless of where you are in your life, we are all very, very busy today. And I think, like anything that matters, you have to have an intentionality around it. And so, is it on your calendar? Have you set up a coffee with someone? Have you gotten out for lunch in the last couple of weeks with somebody that, is new to you? And then, we've both done a lot of, formal networking as well. And whether that was something that was already organized and we participated in it, or whether, we started to champion it because, we've been at industry events, for example, and we were noticing there wasn't as much women networking together, right? And I went to one of your early events, Lisa. You were a master at this, and you said, let's get some people together and let's do some drinks and cocktails and snacks before the big event because we don't all know each other. And I thought that's amazing, and I went. I didn't know you very well, but I went. And then later, we did some more formal things through like networking with and that was also organic. And that
Mhm.
also stemmed out of a need that women had to say, am I the only one feeling this way? Or are there others, in this industry or in this general, business that we're in that feel the same way I do and could really use, you know, um, the informal board of advisors, that we could personally benefit from, other mentoring. Is there a safe place for me to ask questions? Those are the things that networking can lead to. So for me, it's also just always paid back like in spades. So it was never like I looked back and went, oh, I wish I would have networked that. No, like it's the exact opposite. It's like, oh my gosh, I either met the most cool, fun, exciting person and I can't wait to reconnect with them, or it's like, oh, I'm in this situation. I think I know so and so who could help me, or someone who could help me get to that. And that's building that. And there's no more longer a Rolodex. There's not even a business card anymore. So this is all virtual, mental Rolodexes that we have and mental, business cards that we're exchanging, or, contacts on a phone type of thing. So, but that's for me, the networking and the power of the network.
I love that you said that women build relationships to build the business. I think sometimes women don't prioritize their network because they think there's not going to be an immediate result. Well, there might not be an immediate result, but there will be a long term result, whether it's helping you learn something new, providing a safe space for you to ask a question, or having the right resource to call on for a business need down the road. And I had a conversation where people were saying, oh, if I go in the office, it's not a good use of time because I have a lot of coffee dates. And I said, wrong way to look at it. If you go in the office and you meet 10 new people and you have to do your spreadsheet the next day because you didn't get to do it, that's a good use of time. And
Yeah.
we have to remind people of that. It may not have an immediate return, but it will absolutely have a long-term return.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, Lisa, and how you learned and grew in your career, but a lot of how I did that was by watching other
Mhm.
women who went before me. that had helped pave that way. And then
All two of them.
well, that's partly true. I had a funny story. I eventually decided, yeah, I would love to lead a sales organization someday, and I would love to do. And there was somebody doing it at the time, and she was going to run a national sales meeting, and I could tell they put her through some coaching, and I could tell she got coached by a man, because when she got on stage, her mannerisms were all like these, more realistic mannerisms that they had taught her, and I was like, ah. And so I went up to her afterwards, and I was having a conversation. And I was like, I just wanted you to be you, like you're so amazing. And I felt like they were trying to really force her to be somebody different. But what that did for me was, again, because I was always watching and trying to learn from those that went before me, it just said, like, you have to be you. And I can remember one time in public accounting, very conservative, like back in the day, it was all dark suits and bow ties up to here and all that kind of stuff. And women were not partners yet. That was not where they were in their evolution at the time. And I can remember a partner I was wearing, like, at that time. So this was, early 90s. And I was wearing like pink suits, purple suits, like, and it was so bright for them. I don't think they quite knew what to do with it. And the partner said, wow, your suits are really bright. And I said, how was the outcome of my work? Like that. It was just so funny what they paid attention to, but it was so different. And I remember thinking, like, they have to change. And that was part of the reason I left accounting. I did not see myself in that future. Now they've changed a ton since, right?
Mhm.
Because they've all come and evolved quite a bit. But I can remember looking back thinking, I don't see myself in this future here. And then I went and did work where I felt I would fit in better, and had a bright future doing that. So never really looked
I
back.
think also that's part of being dauntless, having the courage to say, this isn't the right fit for me. And I'm not a big company person, or I'm not an accounting person, or I'm not an entrepreneurial person. I need to try something new, and trying it. And it used to be that we stayed with the same company for 20 or 25 years, or the same institution,
Yeah.
no matter what. And I guess I would encourage people to, if they don't feel something is a fit, to first speak up. You may be able to change things within your organization. And if that doesn't work, try something new. So, do you have a podcast or a YouTube video or a book that you would recommend people watch, listen to, or read?
Probably a little bit of each, but I would say, I love the book Speed of Trust, because foundational to so many things that are going to matter in the world going forward, and always have, is how do you build trust with others, either as an individual or as a team or as a company, and especially right now with consumers, because there's so many things that are misinformation out there. So that one I really recommend to folks. And I do listen to podcasts, but oftentimes, for podcasts, I will do a quick one on the way in. Like, I have a good, a healthy commute. So I'll do different ones, through Blink, a Blink list that I have. And I just go and I pick topics that I find interesting. But I also listen to some for fun. Like, I tuned into the Kelsey brothers because my husband's a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. And you know what? I like their humor. Like, and you don't have to love them. You don't have to like them even. But I'm very excited that you are starting a podcast, Lisa. Like I said, in the beginning, I think the way that you have reinvented yourself time after time, and I've seen it, and the way that you stay relevant and what you do to keep yourself sharp. I know you get really inspired by a lot of these things too. What is your, like, what else are you listening to? I guess.
So it's funny that you say humor. I don't know if you noticed at the beginning of this podcast, it says we're going to talk about empowering women and leadership traits, but also it's not too serious. Because
Yeah.
I don't want to, we have a lot of really serious stuff happening in the world right now. And I want to learn, but also learn with a smile. I once sat in a car with you and you were on TikTok before most of us were on TikTok, because you had the instinct that this was going to be something we need to monitor. And actually, I remember you asked me about mobile commerce before I had even heard the term. And so I went home and I looked it up, and I was like, oh God, Lisa is right. We got to get our act together on mobile commerce. And today, a huge percentage of commerce comes through TikTok and through social media. It, I think that just keeping your tentacles out there on everything makes sense.
I always just leave, people with with thoughts about like, make sure that you leave the legacy you want, because you don't get to create it later. You're creating it every day that you're out there, and just making sure that it's one that you're going to be really proud of. And do take those chances and those risks, because that's what makes, for more exciting chapters. And just remember, it's really hard to do it alone. So really bring the people with you.
And on that note, thank you for helping me with this legacy of learning and teaching. And I like to close my podcast with the immortal words of my mom, Arlene Barnett, who said, "You don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up, just what you're going to do next."